Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Samson's mailbag on Saturdays, wherein listeners and viewers ask me questions. As Dishy in chat says, you come for the in-depth Raptor analysis, you stay for Samson's bald ass head. Wearing a hat today, but you get the gist of it. Also, we have hello from Barcelona from Jordy. What's going on, dude? Thanks for listening all the way out in Barcelona. I'm not sure how to say it properly. Today on the docket, answering a whole bunch of questions, trying to figure out the mystery of why guards like Emmanuel Quickly, Brandon Pajemski, Fred VanVleet, despite not appearing to be like all-star level guards, always have these incredible on-offs that do they just win minutes like crazy. We're looking into that. Also, we'll be doing film on Scottie Barnes, his defense. Everyone has been talking about Scottie Barnes' defense for like months now. I did a film room with, it was either Lewis or S. I don't remember who at the start of the season when Scottie first came back. And we're like, look at how he's changing the defense. He's doing such a good job. And I don't think anybody's really gone in depth since then. He deserves it. He won't be selected this year as far as like an all defense selection. The Raptors, they might end up a top half of the league defense. However, the team probably just isn't good enough to justify everyone saying like, yeah, we're going to select this guy for all defense. It probably won't happen. However, I think he's planting the seeds this year of what will eventually return an all defensive selection next season. And we're going to go through the film on why he's so impressive, what he adds to the Raptors, their defense, obviously. And we'll go through a little bit of what he struggles with, which can get better, which maybe you start looking at like he could get into defensive player of the year conversations. It would be an uphill battle, but we'll get into all that kind of stuff. Plus, there's a whole whack of questions. Tom Graham says, "Good morning from Melbourne, Australia." Good morning, Tom. Thank you for listening out there. Raps VE says, like and sub. Yes, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe. It helps the channel. Also, Raps VE, I will be watching more closely for Malwatch's footwork. If I've got that wrong, I've got it wrong. But yeah, something to look forward to. All right. I have to talk about Scottie Barnes. So I'll set the scene because this is like a, podcast. Well, the more people listen on the podcast than on the, I guess, the video version, and they'll be a little like it going through video and breaking down film is obviously not as good on podcast. So I'll set the scene for podcast listeners first. Scottie Barnes is, if you're into like the catch-all statistics, like defensive box score plus minus or EPM or anything like that, he grades out quite well in defense. And if you subscribe to those statistics, then you're probably think that a lot of former Raptors like Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby, those guys are all rock stars when it comes to like EPM and stuff like that. If you buy into it, you've probably been a fan of a lot of Raptors players over the past few years. BPM has taken a little bit of a hit ever since people went and dug into the formula, and they're like, how does Nikola Jokic have the highest defensive BPM for a center ever? That makes no sense. Why does defensive BPM think that an assist is worth basically as much as a block coming from the center position? There's drawbacks to all this. But Scottie, an important thing, every good player is going to be recognized by the catch-all metrics, at least in some regard. It's important to have other markers of success, of course. And Scottie has had other markers of success and always has had, over the last year and a half, maybe like close to 2 years of basketball. He's averaged a lot of the playmaking metrics, like steal percentage, block percentage, the raw stocks numbers. Like last year, 1.5 blocks per game. This year, 1 block per game, 1.5 steals, 2.8 stocks last season, 2.5 this season. That can I think it would be reasonable to expect that to go up over the next couple of years, just based on the positions he'll be playing in, what he'll be doing for the Raptors. He's an exciting defender. He also takes a lot of difficult matchups. We'll get into some of the film on that. Difficult matchups, they remove your ability to play make defensively. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that in the block numbers. An extra half a block a game from last season to this season is because he's spending more time on the perimeter. In the film we look at today, we will see him make big sweeping backline rotations. We'll see him make chase down blocks. We'll see him affect shots at the rim, of course, but he's not being prioritized that way this year necessarily. It is taking away a little bit of his playmaking ability on defense. However, it's a big however. He has shown, I think, a real unbelievable work ethic to provide deny defense, to meet guys early up court, and he's getting better at using his length as a buffer defensively. He still gets over eager at times, especially when guys have a live dribble. I think it's best for him to stay back and let his length cover some of the distance. He can jump out and contest. Like, that's a good approach for him. However, he doesn't always do that. We'll get into some of that film as well, but he's been damn good. And the Raptors have been trending upwards defensively. They've been, I think, the best defense in the NBA in March. Take from that what you will. There's strength of schedule stuff there. They've had a very easy schedule. However, Stravan, I think, has a strength of schedule accounted for defensive metric, and the Raptors were number 2 when you account for the strength of schedule. Their defense has been pretty good since the year turned over. And Scottie Barnes, of course, his health, playing a lot, is a massive motivator of that. They've gotten better performances across the roster. And, you know, the back end of the season does have some humming and hawing as teams kind of walk towards the tank or kind of roll into the playoffs. But the Raptors really, they've come along defensively, and Scottie's a huge part of that. We got to get into the film. So let me mess around with all the screen sharing nonsense that you have to mess around with to get there. All right. Scottie defense film. Here we go. All right. This is sharing for everyone, I presume. This first play, I think, is a really great. It just shows so much of what Scottie's able to do, both from the passive stuff to the playmaking stuff. So you have Jaren Jackson Jr. up here. Jaren Jackson Jr. Above the break for podcast listeners. Jaren Jackson, in playing Scottie Barnes one-on-one, has actually had a lot of success scoring on him. However, Scottie, if he doesn't really want to respect Jaren Jackson Jr. and lays off of him, he can disrupt so much of what the Grizzlies want to do offensively. Obviously, the Grizzlies beat the Raptors in this game, but Scottie did his damnedest to help and affect change. Now, you can see he's heavy in the gap. Jamal Shed is on Ja Morant, and we can watch this develop. Scottie, great dig. Meets Ja on that spin. Jacoby's coming off the strong side corner. It looks like Luke Kennard there, and he's forcing Ja to go back left. Scottie reads that, meets him, and pulls the rebound loose. Ball goes up. We have the wonderful live dribble playmaking, throws it to Grady, and it's a reverse oop. That is a great example of what Scottie has done so well this year, even in the plays where Scottie doesn't end up getting a steal or getting a block. He's able to get guys like Ja or any number of initiators when Scottie is playing off and in the gaps. He's such a big active body there with active hands. He does a really good job of not fouling. When he's in the gaps, he's able to dissuade a lot of drives. He's able to keep guys out of the lane. And even though it's not exactly the same as last year when he would be kind of like in Kelly Olynyk's position and maybe he'd be like that big weak side rim protector rotation, he's up higher in the floor this year, but he's able to step into the gaps. And similar to Jason Tatum, when Jason Tatum was a guy who, my God, he did like a tremendous, tremendous job of being a great player in the gaps. We're also like, that's not exactly what he's been able to do. I guess, you know, it's definitely slowed down a little bit for Jason Tatum, but that's how he started his career. And Scottie is also doing similar things there, just being like the guy at the nail who disrupts so much. And so, yeah, gets that steal. Off we go. By the way, we have 3 minutes of Scottie Barnes highlights. I don't know how long it's going to take me to go through 3 minutes of highlights, dude. So this one is like, again, he's switching off of Marcus Smart here for podcast listeners. And they're just going to they're going to switch across the top because you want to keep Scottie out of screening actions for the most part. The thing he struggles with more than anything is navigating screens. And so if he can just shoot the gap underneath or slide over top without carrying much, and you can run switch schemes, that's going to help him out a lot. But basically he just creates that seal and then gets right back in at the nail, is there to help, walls it off. It's sloppy play from Marcus Smart, but Scottie is what Marcus Smart was going to turn the corner there, but Scottie stepping in is what makes it so that he can't. And he just loses the handle and Scottie goes up with it. This is where Scottie does a really great job of letting his length be the buffer. There are other plays. I didn't clip them because I don't want to do low light watching of Scottie Barnes. But when Scottie plays too high up on guys, I have one of him on OG. There's one of him on Shaedon Sharp. When he plays too high up, he's not super quick turning his hips and keeping up with guys. So he can get beat But what he does here is he lets his length keep the distance between Jaren, and he lets Jaren meet him with physicality, stays with him. And Scottie's always been such a strong leaper off that back foot, and he's such a quick jumper that he's able to get up and block Jaren Jackson Jr. That is really hard to do. Jaren Jackson Jr. is one of the best driving bigs in the NBA. He's super dynamic. He can make it work with both hands. He's very physical as well. Just very impressive stuff from him there. And Scottie uses his length as a buffer and allows his size to kick him back out. This one, I mean, we'll just let it play, right? So Scottie, his proximity to the rim is, you always want big guys around basically for this kind of stuff, right? Like if Scottie is the big man on the floor, which he is here, you have like Battle, Mobo, looks like Davion Mitchell here, and Bruce Brown. Scottie is the de facto big man. And so his proximity to the rim and playmaking at the rim is really great. And just hanging out with Zach Edey, getting in the gaps to completely take it away and getting back to recover and get that block. He's just huge. He's huge in these spaces. And here you can see too, like in the gap, trying to dissuade a Ja Morant drive. And Grady is, competing to try and take away that pocket pass to Edey. And Scottie's playing off of Jaren Jackson Jr., right? The ball goes out there, and now Scottie is the low man. And he's going to see that what happened. Grady Dick is now on Zach Edey. This is a problem. Now, this isn't a great read because Jalen Wells should have gave that right to Zach Edey. But what Scottie does is he scrams Grady out of there. This is feel for the defensive side of the floor. This is really good. This is wonderful. Scrams him out and says, you don't want to be guarding Zach Edey. And he kicks him out. Then what happens? The shot goes up. Then he's around the rim still and blocks Jaren Jackson Jr. It's that proximity to the middle of the floor. He can play make defensively. Whether or not we see, whether or not we see what role Scottie is in the future in certain lineups, if he's playing like that de facto, big position in certain lineups, or whether he's a guy who's in the front part of the half court defensively going forward, when he's in those positions, depending on how much, he's always going to be able to play make defensively. And this is the heart of what gets you selected to these all defensive teams. This is the heart. This is the bedrock of what ends up getting you selected to, defensive player of the year bouts and all that kind of stuff in the future. His defensive repertoire is growing and changing, but I think he's done a tremendous job of growing in each respect. And when he goes back to those cozy confines around the rim, he does such an impressive job. Here, it's just on Chet Holmgren. You can see how many guys, it's not that Chet Holmgren is the fastest guy, but Chet Holmgren turns the corner on Scottie. And Scottie, he was a little bit eager, right? This is a pretty big closeout to give. He just plays it wrong. He lost track of Chet. He jumps out to the wrong spot. But it's that recoverability, right? He hangs with him, strides with him, times him up, and blocks Chet Holmgren at the bucket. If Chet Holmgren is in year 6, maybe he stops and bumps Scottie, and that's better craft in the middle of the floor. But if you're going to allow a guy to time your steps up, Scottie Barnes is not the guy you want to be able to time your steps up. He did a fantastic job of tracking him and ends up getting the block. I mean, unbelievable there. They're trying to initiate delay action. Scottie just has active hands, gets the steal off Jalen Williams. They push the other side. Now here is, you can see Scottie, he's playing. Look at right here. He's in the gap. He's part of the reason you don't want Jason Tatum doesn't want to drive that strong there. He has to backtrack. Scottie jumps it. And here, I just kind of want to talk about this because the way that Scottie, because he is over eager at times, but I don't want to give him a hard time about that because his over eagerness can lead to drives and points. Yes. But it's also, he loves to disrupt the beginning of actions. We'll see it later on in the film, but what Scottie does is look at the vigor he chases Jason Tatum with, just all the way up the floor, providing pressure, getting after him. I think he does a really great job. And here, it's a great screen from Keita. Tatum is going all the way down the floor. And Tatum makes a terrible decision and Scottie hangs back because Hauser is a tremendous 3-point shooter. But it's not that Scottie made a tremendous play here. It was just Jason Tatum, basically an unforced error, but Scottie chasing him around and this willingness to go get guys and be involved in the defensive action all the time. Also, big shout out to Orlando Robinson for hanging in that play and making the right read too. And you can see this here too, right? With Paolo Banchero. So Scottie gets the steal. Now with Paolo Banchero all the way up the floor, almost at the half court line. He's bothering him. He's getting after him. Here, look. And it's a bad screen. Quickly is going to make sure that Scottie will not get clipped. Quickly is going to make sure that Banchero has to take a wider angle. Well done to Quickly. And Scottie's going to be able to collect himself here. And he's going to jump him again. Now he gets beat. And again, Banchero probably is not making a great decision here. Like, he's going one speed, right? He's trying to collect. He's trying to not only take Pirtle on, but he doesn't have an awareness that Scottie's tracking him down. And Scottie just, pins that like crazy. And Banchero probably should have made the lob. But this is the thing too. Great defenders make mistakes. The best defenders in the NBA make mistakes. However, really talented and the best defenders are able to use their size and athleticism to recover and make plays. Scottie always does that. Again, you can see he wants to disrupt these early actions, right? He's jumping over the top because he's playing denied defense on Powell. He's going to chase him around and he's just facing him. This is the question I asked. It wasn't after this game because this was in Orlando, but when I asked Darko about Scottie's denied defense in particular and highlighted, like, it's not usually star players who have this denied defense. It's not usually star players who really grind and play this style. It's usually role players who will do this, like Avery Bradley, Pat Bev, Jamal Shed in coming years will probably do stuff like, he's doing it on Corey Joseph right now, but Scottie has a real willingness and work ethic to impose himself this way. And it does leave him open to some mistakes, but it's also just like really grinding. And that type of ability as a big guy, a lot of times composed players will beat him with a dribble, but if a guy isn't composed, you go jump him, you get a steal. And Scottie is a lot of intensity, he's a lot of size, and he's a lot of willingness, and he throws himself at guys. And he does it with, a pretty good job of staying out of foul trouble too. I find it one of the more impressive aspects of his game, and especially when you consider that the Raptors, in a down year, they are using Scottie as like a point of attack guy. They're throwing him at him, and he isn't quick of feet, so he can get beat. How does Scottie mitigate this stuff? You play deny defense to move players into the back end of the shot clock. What does that allow Scottie to do? That means Scottie can limit the ability to reset. It means if a guy's coming downhill, they might not want to bring top side action with playmaking. That means Scottie can time guys up for blocks. It means he can commit to shot contests more often instead of having to play the shot and the pass. His intensity helps the team by moving teams, the defense by moving teams in the back end of the shot clock, by disrupting the first action consistently. And yeah, you win some, you lose some, but these are great tenets of his defense and of what the Raptors want to accomplish overall. Not everything is going to be a home run. Not everything's going to work, but these are really great things we're seeing. And even here, like, we'll see, this doesn't work out perfectly here, this is a different play. There's another one with Franz, but Scottie, he finally gets to not play denied defense on Paolo, right? He's playing in the middle of the floor. He's cutting off, the Magic don't really have great spacing. Scottie doesn't even have to split the difference between two guys here. He's just plugging up the lane while also keeping that angle to steal. Eventually the pass Franz is going to try and make to the corner. He's huge. When he plays in the middle of the floor, he tags Wendell Carter Jr. there as Pirtle's playing quite high. So he's taking Wendell Carter Jr. here. And he's also being able to play right in the middle of the floor and create that angle. He's watching where Franz is trying to go and go out and pluck it, going the other way. Huge guy in the middle of the floor. Even here, right? Like, Keontae George is a quick guard who's getting after it. And he's obviously had struggles with his offensive decision-making, but Scottie's going to go jump him. And he gets beat, but Scottie, because it's late clock, he can, if he goes and jumps guys and they turn the corner on him, Scottie is a great chase down athlete. He's fantastic at that. So it's that clock awareness. If this is like late in the shot clock, probably what's happening, and Jamison Battle also knows he doesn't have to come that far off of the corner, because look at Scottie, right? Scottie's in this heavy chase down mode, and he knows he's going to hit that out of that's going to be a home run. Bop. Punches it way out of bounds. Fantastic. But it's that late clock stuff that Keontae George knows he has to get a shot up. He can't get the defense into rotation and try and find something. So Scottie can commit to this stuff. This one too is just like, yep, he does a great job in my estimation here of letting his length kind of be a buffer. He lets Marcus Smart come to him and he opens his hips up, tracks him, bop. Also, short clock situation. This awareness of the clock is really important for defensive playmakers, and especially for shot blockers, especially big time like rotation shot blockers like Scottie Barnes, a guy who has to really leave his feet to block shots. If you're going to commit to that, you have to have a keen awareness of what the clock is. Could you get got with a lob? Are you committing too much? But when you know people don't have time to play around with, you can commit to things. And Scottie is a very cerebral player, and he's been keeping, like, he keeps tabs on this stuff, and he has a very keen awareness of it. Here, again, we're going to see him. Look at that. There's no way you should be able to cover this much space. Scottie is almost stapled. Like, he's almost at the logo there for podcast listeners, the logo on the side of the court, like in the I don't know, 17 feet away from the rim, hanging out in the corner. He's covering that guy. They just run a back screen, right? And Bub Carrington comes wide open quickly, or it's a split action actually, quickly, and Battle completely mess up the communication there. The ball goes Bub Carrington, and Scottie tracks all the way from the corner to block him at the rim. Great recognition. Very quickly got over there. Quick jumper, just beat him at the top. Now this one is an example, in my estimation, of Scottie like overplaying it as a defensive player, right? Shaedon Sharpe is really quick. Shaedon Sharpe doesn't have the most, like, the craziest handle, but he definitely is going to beat Scottie off the step if they're put in that matchup, right? And so Scottie doesn't help himself here. He overplays him. He's going to try and gamble, and they're even here, right? But Scottie's kind of like trying to turn his hips, and Shaedon is blistering quick, and he gets so much clearance that, like, Scottie is just not close to contesting that. He's in a terrible position. And Scottie doesn't do this all the time. He's doing a better job of it as he like develops, but just he overplays guys sometimes. And it's somewhat of the limitation of the roster. Like, if AJ Lawson isn't here, if this is Jonathan Mobo instead, maybe this looks a little bit different. You know, Colin Castleton is the low man, but he has responsibilities in the weak side corner. You know, I'm not really sure, but Scottie has to be aware of who he has behind him. And this is just like he's overplaying his hand and giving up an easy drive. And I think Scottie, it will suit him better going forward if he lets his length be a bit of a buffer. And we will see him do that against Shaedon Sharpe later on. It'll just involve a screen. This one, too, we can see you don't need to play like this on OG Anunoby. It's absolutely unnecessary. And this is the type of decision-making that will really elevate Scottie in the future as an isolation defender. Is OG Anunoby, if you play him close, he doesn't have a manipulative dribble. If you play him close, you allow him to step past you. If you play him a bit back, he's not a crazy pull-up threat at all, and he isn't going to, like, you know, ball you up with like this crazy handle. So if you play him close, basically you're giving him an opportunity to drive. And OG is very physical. He's very athletic. He turns the corner. There you go, bucket. And Scottie can avoid some of this stuff, as we see with Jason Tatum. Like, he plays him close, but you can see if he plays him back like this, it's less about turning with a guy, and it's more so about making these big steps. And who on the wing has bigger steps than Scottie Barnes defensively, right? Keep those steps wide and slide with guys. Don't worry about flipping hips and turning around if you get beat. Just let the length be a buffer. And sure, Tatum creates this big separation, but Scottie has so much length and can get out there and can contest. This is a better blueprint of what we want him to do going forward. And we'll see, this is against Franz as well. Look at Scottie, by the way. Look at him. The start of this possession. You got Powell in the corner. They're bringing him out. Scottie's going to fight him like hell. He wants to get in front. He's going to fight him every inch. Okay, they're going to switch out. RJ, he's going to be on Powell now, right? And then Scottie's going to, yes, use the length as a buffer on Franz. Use the length as a buffer, right? This is good. Now he needs the screen because he can't just step past him. And Scottie, I think, does a really good job here. There's still length. This means that he doesn't have to turn. It means he can step wide, right? And there's a moving screen there, but that happens all the time in the NBA. Scottie's going to fight like hell to take away this pocket pass, and he does so. He eliminates that. He's playing the angle really good. Now, Franz, he's going to miss this shot because it's really tough. And Scottie, it's just a bigger guy beating him on the offensive glass. But as far as like process for pick and roll defense here, I think he allowed the right amount of space. He took away what he was supposed to, and Emmanuel quickly actually could have cracked down on Wendell Carter maybe a little bit better, a little more physicality, and Scottie might have been able to go up and clean that glass. But this is defensive stuff. I don't want to get down too much on Emmanuel. It's just Scottie, I think he played that nearly perfectly. You just have to be able to clean up the glass at the end. But that is, Wendell Carter Jr. is good. Franz Wagner is obviously one of the best driving wings in all of the NBA. The Raptors forced him into a really tough shot there. They didn't get rewarded for it necessarily, but Scottie, as the point of attack defender there, did all the right things. These decisions as a point of attack defender are huge. It's a really big deal. And these will help him as he tries to get these defensive accolades in the future. This one too, look, they're trying to establish the Atlanta Hawks. They want to start their play. They're like, all right, let's get in the offense. Scottie's playing deny defense on Larry Nance Jr. Why? Because he knows Larry Nance isn't going to be dangerous back cutting him when Jakob is there, because he knows the Hawks want to try and establish their offense through a sequence of like get actions and handoffs for Trey. And he's like, why don't we just make things more difficult? This is a first play of the game. And Scottie is just like, I'm going to make life hell. This is what I want to do. And I love that. He tries to jump it. And this too is like Scottie, I think, plays really great defense here, right? What does he do? This is a mistake on Jakob's part, because Jakob, why are you so close to Onyeka Okongwu? Scottie's tracking him. Grady is cracking down. He's tagging. I think that Jakob probably should have committed more to Trey here. Nobody's on Nance, right? Scottie tracks all the way back, and Jakob plays it too soft on Trey, and Trey is able to get in for the layup there. However, the start of that play, I love the start of that play, because this is something Scottie does a lot of the time. He creates problems for teams who want to establish offense near or around the elbow by being really intense, a lot of work ethic, and plays deny and tries to gum up everything. His intensity is really a big feature of what he does. And they score there, but I like the defense. You can see it here too. Davion Mitchell on ball. Bam Adebayo. They want to establish through the elbow. They want to start working that offense. Look at Scottie fight, man. He really wants to get that action. He makes them start the action elsewhere. Now, I'm pretty sure the Heat score on this play. But if you're trying to disrupt an offense on the other side, making them consistently go to the second spot on the floor, taking away the comfortable thing they want to do very often, is a wonderful way to affect change, right? And you can see Scottie here hanging out. He's the low man there. He takes away what he needs to. And yes, Bam Adebayo is a big guy. He beats him on the offensive glass. Sometimes you win them, sometimes you lose them. But Scottie's competing like hell against these guys, these bigger guys, right? And you'll see it against Joel Embiid, right? Okay, they switch. Jonathan Mobile and Paul George, you're super comfortable with that action. Joel Embiid on Scottie Barnes, maybe not as much. But what happens? Scottie fights like hell. He's trying to take away that post entry, and he's going to make him try and go over the top. Why? Because Quickly's waiting in the paint. If they send it over the top, Quickly's going to show a body here. Scottie can slide back behind. They'll be able to defend that action. And then, again, pops out. They're cracking down. They have somebody for Joel Embiid. The shot goes up. Yes, they have to, gang rebound as a team, but they do get the ball. Obviously, they got a little bit lucky there, but, it is what it is. I just mean, Scottie's doing a great job here. He's competing like hell, and he's not a perfect defender, but Pascal used to compete like this in the early part of his career. OG competed like this for a very long time too, but it's also why I said, I can't remember when we were talking about it, when I was comparing, Scottie to OG. Caleb asked me to do year 4 versus year 4. It's like, you can make the case that Scottie pretty well, it seems to me, is, whatever my analysis is worth, that we're looking at the guy who probably, if he stays with the Raptors for long enough, like through the end of his first max contract, he'll be considered the greatest defender who ever occupied this team for the longest amount of time. He's brought so much to the defense, and I suspect will continue to do so. So here, this a little bit of laziness, but this is also the weakness of his, right? You want to keep Scottie. This is kind of, forecasting the future. You want to keep Scottie away from screens if you can. That's why a switch scheme will be really strong for him, or if he's paired with like a really great guard who can absorb some of these matchups, but he just is not quick around screens. Like, he really gets lost, and obviously Trey misses that shot, but like, they just ran a corner handoff, which is not the best place to get a handoff from, and they get a layup attempt out of it, right? And it's not even like, you miss shots, but you don't want to give up that look repeatedly. And this one too, you can see this is Scottie avoiding screens. When I was going through his handoffs, like I was watching all of his handoffs this year, I believe, and he's getting a little bit lucky with it. So I don't know how this will look in the future, but I'm fairly certain that Scottie on handoffs, guys are shooting 3 of 16 from downtown against him. That's like 15% roughly, right? When I was watching all of those, he's getting lucky on some of them. But as a guy who struggles going around screens, and if the Raptors are going to let him guard at the top, it's up to Scottie to know like the matchup and know who he's okay to go under screens on. And this is the upside of going under screens here. As you can see, I believe it's KJ Martin, right? Or not KJ Martin. I can't remember his name. Martin is his last name. But Scottie's going to shoot the gap on this screen and meet him on the other side. What happens? Just steps with him and blocks him. Like, that's how easy it can be for Scottie. However, here's the example of basically he gets switched out onto Shaden Sharp because Scottie and Jamal are going to switch this possession. And it becomes Scottie's job. He's just kind of like hanging around the back. Now, maybe you can make the case that he's doing this because Jamal gets caught on this screen. You know, they're running Chicago action basically, right? We see Jamal gets caught on the screen, and maybe Scottie thinks Jamal is going to be slippery than he is, but Jamal is telling him like, hey, Scottie's trying to come out on the other side, but eventually nobody commits, and Shaden Sharp, he misses, but that's a great look. So just into the future, I think it's probably important to keep Scottie away from like to keep Scottie away from screens if you can. But he's done such a good job of committing himself to defensive process, even when teams score or get offensive rebounds. I think that you can really see Scottie doing things that are the right play on the floor. And also, I mean, we watched it with Pascal. We watched it especially with OG's last however long with the Raptors. He was quiet quitting defensively, right? But Pascal, his fall off defensively, it came like pretty. It's obviously been better, especially the decision making with the Pacers. He's very important to what they do. But as far as like being a heavy usage defender who you throw at a lot of players, Pascal lost that ability, like, and especially like that backline sweeper ability pretty quickly. And it wasn't only that he wasn't able to like keep up there, but it was that like the defensive decision making did take a hit as well as his career wore on with the Raptors. And he's still graded out as a plus, but it just wasn't like, I remember it's a proprietary metric. It got purchased by an NBA team, the Wizards, I'm pretty sure. But Jacob Goldstein, I think the player impact metric or whatever the hell it was, like Scottie in the 2019-20 playoffs, the obviously a nightmare playoffs for him offensively, but defensively, I think he graded out as the third best defender by that metric with guys like Anthony Davis. He used to be so high level. ND in chat says, do you think the groin stuff affect Pascal as well? Yeah, like the accumulation. Also, there was the 1 year where Pascal led the NBA in isolations, in closeouts, and in minutes per game. What Nick Nurse had Pascal doing for like years straight was just an insane amount of work. And we saw that there was cumulative load, let's say. Even Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp, like they lost a little bit of their juice when they were running like 20 miles more than every other team in the Premier League. It eventually came back. They had like a down year because they're like, damn, we're running everywhere. This is tough. Also, Zarar is in chat. Hey, Zarar, what's going on, dude? Yeah, lots of fun defensive possessions from Scottie here. So, and also from Caleb says, I feel like Scottie's ability to read movement as a defender is highly connected to his own use of his eyes as a passer. This is a really fun question, and one I like to think about a lot, because you see, like, it's the DeMar DeRozan question is a really good one, because DeMar got so good at reading the back lines of defense and got so good at reading guys who were kind of like lying in wait on the back end. And DeMar became such a clinical machine at making reads against set defenses, getting downhill, keeping a guy in jail, making the skip, or getting it to the guy in the gap. Like, really great. But he never had that defensively. And there are lots of guys who do this unbelievable job of reading things as an offensive player. And maybe they can't read it as a defensive player, or maybe you could be a little bit more like, and wonder if it's just if it's just that they don't want to. There's a possibility. Raps VE says, am I wrong to feel like Scottie learned to use his size to gap offensive players in the last year or two? Feel like that used to be an issue for him. Oh, you asked this 23 minutes ago. Sorry. When I'm sharing the screen, the chat isn't available. My bad. But yes, I talked about this a little bit. Scottie has definitely gotten better at this, and I think it pays off. It pays off really well. Zarar, thank you for loving the weekend stream. I appreciate that. Okay, I think we have talked 35 minutes about Scottie, roughly. Holy moly, that's a lot. Okay, that's probably enough Scottie defensive film. I'm sure everyone got their fill. I hope everyone enjoyed it. We're going to talk about some other stuff now. Make sure to like this stream. It helps us out and spreads it to other people who maybe they want to get into the deep dive on Scottie's defensive stuff. I guess I'll give Scottie's defensive numbers since people love numbers. So we have his play type data. As far as guarding pick and roll ball handlers, Synergy has him in the 65th percentile. That's rated as very good. Spot up, which is he's closing out to contest guys or he's trying to corral a drive. He's 59th percentile. Isolation, and this is where we're seeing, Scottie struggles a little bit as an isolation defender. He's in the 36th percentile. And some of this does have to do with the quality of the back line behind him or the fact that he shares the front half of the defense with not a lot of great defenders, right? Like the gap help that Scottie provides will elevate other players' isolation defense. But Scottie, unfortunately, does not have a Scottie Barnes in his gap for him. So some of this stuff happens. But what we talked about where he clearly needs to improve on kind of like over pursuing guys at times. Yes, that's affecting that 36th percentile. On handoffs, he's 89th percentile. And some of that is to do 3 of 16 guys are 16% basically are shooting on handoff threes. That is not going to stay at 16% forever. Although when he shoots the gap, he's pretty good at jumping out on the other side of it to contest. Similar to what we saw Cooper Flagg doing when I was going through his film. Post-ups, he's 85th percentile. And I mean, that's really good. He's very strong. He tracks guys well. He clearly matches their body movements there. He's 70th percentile as a pick and roll man guarding that guy. And he's 39th percentile tracking guys off of screens. And again, tracking guys off of screens, some of that is how players, how they use the screens. Like, Jamison Battle would have given up that if Scottie didn't come and block who was above Carrington, that would be on Jamison Battle technically, but perhaps the scheme calls on a split action like that for Emmanuel Quickley to actually jump under and go and guard Bub Carrington. So it could be someone else. Like this kind of stuff with going through defense, it always could be something else. But Scottie doesn't have like the greatest defenders when he's off guarding off screen, that if somebody back cuts or if somebody has like an edge with him in pursuit, if Jakob's not on the floor, maybe it's kind of hard to justify like that level of pursuit. When the team has that full training camp together, when there's a little bit more size on the floor next year, we're really going to see where some of this stuff lies. I think Scottie so objectively has entered the, borderline elite level of defender. It's on tape. It's in the numbers. I think it's the easiest thing to argue. His offensive prowess is hard to argue right now, but his defense has come so far. Like I used to watch Scottie film and see so mmany mistakes and be like, we can see where this gets better. But now the mistakes are really small, quite frankly, and the upside is massive constantly. He just such a good job defensively. Really impressed with him. So those are the numbers. We're going to get into kind of like a fun little question about, what the hell is it? Oh yeah, sorry. Nesta, who is always listening to the lives and catching them, said, I can't catch your live today, but curious to hear what your thoughts are about Scottie's future Defensive Player of the Year campaign once he is not going to be tasked so much on offense next season with BI taking things from his plate. And do you see him reaching my 3.5 stocks prediction finally? So if Scottie is moved lower in the defense, we saw with those blocks, the proximity to the rim. He's a quick jumper. He has a massive wingspan. He clearly has a great nose for where the action is going. He's going to rack up blocks. Like 1.5 blocks is currently his career high. I don't think that will be his career high by the time he hangs it up. 1.5 steals is currently his career high. It's this year, but I really do think there's probably a year where he can be like 1.8, 1.7 blocks and around that for steals. If he had 3.5 stocks in a season, it wouldn't surprise me. I'd be like, wow, we're really seeing something. I don't think he can keep this up, for years at a time. But if there was a season where it all clicked, I think that he can have that type of defensive playmaking. As for defensive player of the year, I mean, I'm definitely a Scottie optimist, and like that's an objective thing. But and especially defensively after seeing all this stuff, I think it's on the table. I wouldn't say it's a strong likelihood that one guy gets selected every year. I mean, it's really hard. Like it's really, really hard. One guy gets selected every year. So I wouldn't bet on it or anything like that, but I think it's a possibility. Like when Pascal, who was playing unbelievable defense, I never looked at Pascal and thought, he could win Defensive Player of the Year. It wasn't in the cards. And also like OG, I was like, I wonder if he might be able to do it. However, I mean, it's tough to win it from the wing. And like when we were comparing OG and Scottie, the big difference is the isolation stuff. And that makes you more of a wing/guard defender, which is a tough place to win from. But Scottie has so much playmaking around the rim that you wonder. But ND brings it up. Hard to beat Mobley, Wemby, and Chet. Yeah. And like if Wemby has a healthy season, like Wemby had that quote, he's like, well, I'm glad Rudy can get it because it's mine for the next 11 bajillion years or whatever. Mobley is also unbelievable. Mobley is a better defender than Scottie right now, I think. That's not a bad thing or anything like that. Mobley's unbelievable. Chet, if he's healthy, I mean, the level of defensive talent in the NBA right now is insane, and nobody has a chance if Wemby plays a full season. Like, quite frankly, there is no shot at all. Caleb says Scottie optimist, but NBA attitudes toward Raptors mega pessimist. Yeah, and I also understand like why I think the Brandon Ingram thing will work is because I'm hyper contextualizing the fit. I wouldn't really know how to hyper contextualize like a fit on the Wizards. I don't know their game well enough. And if you're just looking at it, it might make sense to just be like, what does Brandon Ingram do? And look at what the Raptors are doing and be like, I don't know. You have to really dig into the weeds and try and convince yourself, like, I think this is going to work. And also looking at the cap structure of the Raptors, the incentive to compete during Scottie's max contract, all these motivators, I think it does make sense. But I understand why guys and girls around the NBA coverage might be like, I don't really understand it. I get it. However, I do not share the same opinion. ND had a question about 3-point percentage, kind of off topic, but the Raptors are bottom in the league at 3-point percentage. Do you think that's sustainable or is it just luck? Okay, let me look at their team stats. They're the worst in the NBA in what they allow. Let's see. Defense, accuracy. Okay. Cleaning the Glass, which sorts out garbage time, has them at third. They're allowing 35.4%. Corner threes, they're allowing 37.7. Non-corner, 34.5. They're also top 10 in mid-range. Obviously, this has really been coming around throughout the back end of the season. Teams have been missing a lot of shots against them. This is a really good question. I typically like to see teams. This is like the Giannis championship Bucks thing with Lopez. The Bucks were like, we can't. Well, a lot of teams don't think they can really control. This is when you look at the analytics and you kind of like map out the history of the NBA. You see that teams have a really tough time controlling for 3-point percentage. What teams think they can control for the most part is 3-point volume. And so where are the Raptors in volume? Let's see. They allow the 18th most threes. 40% or 39% of shots they allow on the floor are coming from downtown. They are doing a really good job of limiting corner threes there. They're doing a bad job of limiting corner threes. 26th. Interesting. We're right back to the Nick Nurse Raptors. Yeah, because they're in the gap so much and they try and they're so active. They have to collapse from all over the floor. Yeah, I think I'll just say I don't think that the 3-point accuracy, like them being top 3 in the league or whatever. Yeah, last year they were 26th, 35% versus 38%, 38% the year before. In 2019-20, they were the best at guarding threes. They were first, 34%. I don't really believe it. If you're a truly elite defense, then I might believe it based on the tough positions you're putting players in. But the Raptors are what, 16th right now? I think this is more so like the ebb and flow of accuracy kind of ebbing their way a little bit. It could flow the other way, I suppose. But yeah, kind of getting into the weeds on this stuff. There was a question, and a good question, that I have to find. Lord in heaven, I get so caught up on these. We've been talking about Scottie Barnes and defense for 45 minutes, dude. You know what? That's nuts. That's so much talk. I hope people are enjoying it, but yeah, good Lord, that is a lot. Okay, really good question here from Cat and Bird. Quote, what are your thoughts on certain complementary or backup guards having such positive on-off indicators, but not passing the quote-unquote eye test? In 2021-22, quickly plus 12.2 points per 100 possessions. Pajemski this year, plus 6. Davion this year, plus 8.6. Tyus Jones in 2018, 5.2. Fred VanVleet in 2018, plus 6. And they go on to say, and by not passing the eye test, I mean these are competent to good players, but not fringe all-star impact as the on-off would suggest. Is it just competent guard play in bench lineups that much of a needle mover, or is it the seamlessly fitting in next to stars? So I went and poked around on this, and the lineups that these guys win most of their minutes in. I just used Fred and Quickly because Raptors fans won't care that much about Pajemski. I know you watch the Warriors, but Pajemski, I think, is more of seamlessly fitting in next to stars. ND brings up Ty Jerome. Ty Jerome is a good one, yeah. Ty Jerome, what a season he's been having. But so when he was winning all those minutes before his like counting stats popped off at all, he was part of the bench mob, and the bench mob won a million minutes that year. And the second lineup that he was in and won a ton of minutes was the lineup where he replaced OG Anunoby in the starting lineup. And also I think Pascal Siakam was replacing Ibaka. And so they started playing faster because DeMar is no longer your 2. DeMar plays at the 3. Fred gets to play like more of that really great guard defense that he brought at the start of his career, for sure, and that he still brings, quite frankly. And he improves the spacing. They play faster. Kyle gets to do a little bit of stuff off ball, and all of that kind of, I guess, calcified into really big time winning minutes. Now, Fred currently with the Rockets, and I've talked to like Rockets scouts about and people within the Rockets organization is like, why is Fred still so important? Because, on the Raptors, as I've gone over many times, I still advocated that Fred was a good player. And much of the fan base was saying, like, he is literally tanking this team. Like, he's the reason they don't do well. And the discussion around Fred, the Overton window shifted an insane amount. Like, you could not have a normal conversation about Fred VanVleet. No shot. And what Fred does currently is he provides stout guard defense. He controls turnovers. And a turnover is like a missed shot is a turnover, yes, but a missed shot has a chance to go in. And even bad shooters have a certain likelihood, right? And what Fred does, even though there's a lack of creation juice for sure, there's a lack of efficiency, he helps you control on both sides the turnover differential. The possession battle, he helps you win that. And he helps organize the floor to move, ideally, more of the shots away from himself if he can. Sometimes he takes too many. And move it on to other more efficient players. He does a great job of servicing Şengün in Houston. Raps VE says, as a player, Fred is cool, but in my opinion, people thought he was a narcissist. Yeah. I know people thought he was a narcissist. I think that's, I think people just hyper focused on Fred and looked for anything. Fred is obviously very confident and he is very stout and stubborn in his way. But if you're going to call Fred VanVleet a narcissist, you're going to have to do it for 98% of the NBA. He's mostly just like a hard ass guard in the NBA. Narcissist and that kind of stuff. If you're going to start tagging players like that, I disagree heavily. I think it's just projection. It's just people having wars about their favorite players. And people do have wars about their favorite players. I mean, this, like, again, Scottie Optimist right here. You can see it in my coverage, but like, just in responding to fans and seeing like dialogue over the years, it's like, yeah, Scottie fans, militant group. They like their guy. They will go to war for that guy. They battle for that guy. You know what I mean? And also, I mean, that's just it. And also, like, yeah, Fred underperformed. He didn't shoot very well in his last year in Toronto. It exacerbated because they needed his shooting so bad because they were a wing-led offense team. It was just like, well, if Fred doesn't shoot, things look bad. And then he did, you know, this is where the narcissism thing probably comes from. It's when he did the JJ Redick podcast and he was like, I don't like how this is going. And Fred was saying that all year. He, even though I asked him, you know, at not training camp, media day, I asked him about, you know, his role changing perhaps in a wing-led offense. And then he was like, I'm a basketball player. I can play anywhere. And then throughout the rest of the season, he was like, I'm a point guard. You have to give me the ball. And I think that's probably not motivated by narcissism. I think that was because it was a contract year. And he's like, I need to get stats and put up numbers so I can get paid. And get paid he did. And now he's working with, I guess, like Houston, and Houston likes him. And so that's Fred. It's contextual reasons, but Fred is a good player. I know he made an all-star game. And this is where like the Overton window shifted. Is like Fred made an all-star game, and I never thought Fred was an all-star guard. Not like, obviously I wanted him to make an all-star game, but I was like, I couldn't believe that he was. I remember the Darius Garland versus Fred debates, and I was like, well, I think Garland is better. But I went from being like the guy who's like, I don't really think Fred's an all-star, to being like, you love Fred because you say he's good. ND says lots of Reddit sources saying he doesn't like Scottie also help people's perception of him. Well, that's your mistake, dude. Every once in a while I get shown something on Reddit, and it's just like, I don't know. People love to talk about people. I'm a regional sports podcaster, and people talk about me on Reddit, or I've had that sent to me. Reddit's a crazy place, and I understand Reddit is like a bubbling hive of, you know, if you want to be part of community, hell yeah. But I would not expect Reddit to be the home of the insightful commentary on player relationships. That's my personal thing. Now, Emmanuel, quickly, again, to the earlier question, Catherine, I'm so sorry I've gone far field on your question. I've hardly focused in on it. Okay, so quickly, why was quickly like a huge plus minus on off God? In New York in that 2021-22 season was the season where New York had basically their own version of the bench mob. They had Alec Burks in there and Mitchell Robinson, but basically they switched out the guards. Derrick Rose was in there. Obi Toppin was in those lineups, and Emmanuel Quickley. And so that's like, I see the Reddit comments. I have to just keep it going. I'll respond to those after. Basically, Quickley and that New York team, when you're switching over from like RJ and Julius, the shape of the offense actually changed quite a lot. And that New York, I remember I was talking to Ariel like a lot at that point in time. Ariel Pacheco, he's been on this podcast before. Great coverage of the Knicks. They play faster and they play looser and they play a better defense at that point in time. And so their bench mob just won so many minutes. And as far as like, I mean, the next year is that Emmanuel Quickley has always won minutes, always. Or teams have always been better with him on the floor. And where that ends and begins is, as I guess, like here, as you said, is it just competent guard play in bench lineups that much? Like, is that much of a needle mover? Yes. I think competent guard play in bench lineups is a massive needle mover. We see this happen all the time. And competent guard play in transitional lineups is also a huge needle mover. We see this all the time as the NBA tried to like load up on wings, and as the NBA tried to load up on like everybody on the wing has to create. And they're like, wings are just like bigger guards who are, they have more utility on the defensive side of the floor and they can get their shot up over guys. It's like a lot of the soft skills of organizing offense, controlling pace and tempo, wings weren't able to immediately do. And so when you introduce a guard to the floor, it simplifies things for everybody. And that's what Davion Mitchell, despite being hyper limited as a scorer and a shooter, when Davion Mitchell was on the floor for the Raptors this year, they played better because he had no ego about his own offense. He wanted to set the table for other guys, and he really competed like extremely hard on defense. And as Trey and I did the big breakdown on, the defense was really, really reliant on him at that point in time when they were playing the high pickup points. So contextually, these teams scream for competent guard play. And a lot of teams that are on the in-between aren't necessarily giving the ball to guards a lot of the time. They're asking like their shiny new wing to create. This happens all the time. And then the guard comes in and you play good offense and you do all kind of stuff. It's like wings have to develop that. And they typically start developing that at a later age. Like control for a wing as an offensive hub comes a lot later in their career, usually, than for a guard. And I think competent guard play is just like that unlocks so much of what teams need to do to win basketball games. And I love guard play. Huge fan. Vegan Grass says Michael Grange wrote an article on Fred and Pascal not getting along with the young guys. Don't blame Reddit. Or yeah, sorry. It's ND suggested that, and ND could be right. Like, I mean, Reddit talks about a million things. A lot of people go to Reddit. I've seen Reddit screenshots. I've seen people use Reddit talks as, but I don't know the Grange article you're referring to, but I believe it. like yes, but I don't know. We talked about this before. Is like Nurse and Fred were like the last bastion of, because Pascal is mostly hands off. Everyone likes Pascal. Pascal is really easy to get along with. But Fred and Nurse were like the last bastion of like the hard ass Raptors. And the Raptors have been very not hard ass since then, right? Like, and we can all see that. And yeah, Fred definitely was like in the same way where like Thad Young wanted like a little bit of austerity during warmups and was trying to put like Scottie on. And then Scottie was like, get out of here, all that kind of stuff. And then Thad was like, hey, what the, you don't talk to me like that. Then they had their little scuffle. He's like, you don't do that shit to me. The Raptors went from being kind of like culture, like fatherhood, work, to being kind of like, yo, it's chill. Like we're having fun. We're getting better. We're doing all this kind of stuff. And that there's a bit of a culture shock and people are going to feel one way. People are going to feel the other. And there you go. Bob's your uncle. Mel says, any Grady updates? The last time when I sat across from Darko, he said no. So nothing yet from me. Although, I want to see Grady play. So, Channel says, in hindsight, Scottie might have just been telling Thad about duties on a shipment. Yeah, that is kind of funny, dude. Like it's free engagement, I guess, for everybody when they're just like, yeah, I don't know, Toronto. I hate going through customs. Everyone, like, it seemed like one of those interviews would release like every 3 years. And then all of a sudden they released like 3 at once. And then everyone is always talking about, because you get the engagement from people who are like, oh yeah, Canadians, am I right? Which I don't know how many people want to operate that way, but fine. And then you get a lot of people from Toronto who are obviously like, fuck you say? You don't say that about me, dude. It's yeah. Channel says NBPA pension needs work. Too many player podcasts. There are a lot of player podcasts. And I think the interesting thing too is that like a player podcast used to be guaranteed successful, but they're not anymore. And it's because players, they're not candid enough. And this also is a thing, is like you can be really good at basketball. You can like have stories and that kind of stuff, but like being able to communicate to people and have them be like interested in it is a completely different thing. Like you look at a player podcast and like there's player podcasts that get less views than this. They know way more than I do. Of course they do. They're way better at knowing basketball. They know so much more. But when you're kind of like advocating for yourself, people obviously, they don't, ND says need to be like Jeff Teague. Laughing at yourself goes a long way. Jeff Teague does it so far the other way. He's an all-star guard. He's an all-star guard, and he's acting like he was scraping by, dude. And he's a talented storyteller. My God, is he a talented storyteller? From Div B, if this current Raptors team could add either prime Jose Calderon or prime Mo Pete, which would you take? Give me Jose, dude. I think Jose, he would have this thing humming. We talked about how point guards are really important. I think Jose Calderon would be able to run this offense in an unbelievable way. An unbelievable way. If Jose Calderon was he was directing traffic, I think that would be a sick, sick basketball team. Goose asks, who's the most AI generated player in the league? Jason Tatum. The AI anomaly, as I coined it. Ian Finlayson says, how much do you see the Raptors isolation frequency going up next season with Brandon Ingram and more Emmanuel Quickly? And would it going up be a good or bad thing? Their isolation frequency, like, you never want to isolate too much. I hope the frequency doesn't go up that much. I just hope that more of the isolations that other guys have been taking this year are mostly just filtered over to Brandon Ingram. Now, Emmanuel Quickly is a decent isolator, but he does it a little bit better in like flow of pick and roll rather than just like, getting into it. Yeah, the isolation frequency will go up, I'm sure. But as we've talked about on the podcast, the Raptors are literally the worst team in the NBA when it comes to points per possession on ball actions. They have no pop, zero. And I don't want to be too offensive and say like none, but if you're the worst team in the league, relative to the league, you got nothing, dude. And Brandon Ingram has a lot. He will definitely up that isolation prowess, and there's no way he doesn't. Charming said, I always like behind the scenes stuff. Which player and or coach do you have the most connection with, and why? Is that mutual? What do you talk about most? And or, so I guess there was like, I don't know, in the same way that I try not to do this because like it's like what LeBron said. This is the version of the in the back, like the background stuff behind the scenes. LeBron brought it to the forefront, right? Where LeBron was like, Windy acts like he's my best friend, whatever, is, I think, because of proximity, like I have spent time around Kevin Durant. I've spent time around like guys who are like major celebrities and major stars. My proximity does not mean anything. They'll say hi. Sometimes they remember who you are. Sometimes you can develop a relationship with players. You can have like a good repartee. That can happen. But these guys are mostly just being polite. And I thank them for being polite. It's like it's that courtesy of treating me like a human being rather than just like I have wealth and status and I do all this. But I wouldn't ever like say like connection. Like I like talking with Darko. I think Darko responds much better to my questions than Nick did. And even like traveling coaches who come in, like, there's the like big meme with Rick Carlisle who's like, hey, I appreciate you're noticing that about our team, but I'm not going to talk about that. What are you thinking? Like, obviously I'm not going to talk. Obviously I'm not going to talk about this, but Darko indulges me to talk about that kind of stuff. And he does like to talk about it. So I appreciate that about Darko. I've always said my favorite player to talk to was OG, still is OG. I think he's really funny. I think I figured out how to talk to OG to get good answers. You don't frame questions. You just have to ask a lot of follow-ups and treat it like a conversation. Otherwise, because OG won't monologue, so you have to engage him like that. But yeah, as far as like connection and stuff like that, I don't think it goes that far. You know what I mean? And you don't want to get yourself in that trap because players are cool. They're like, again, these are people that people are like, that's my hero. And for someone like myself, like when I talk to DeMar DeRozan, what am I going to be like? When I was 12 years old, you got drafted. Well, I don't know how old I was. I guess I was maybe 14. When you got drafted, you're so cool. It's like, no, dude, you just got to treat them like a person. And again, they're not my friend. They don't want to be my friend. They don't care. Nobody cares. They're just being nice. And hopefully I'll be nice too. But yeah, that's kind of yeah. Andy says, has any of the players coach talked to you about your pieces? It's so cool how Hallie is a fan of Caitlin stuff. Yeah, you get if you do. I told the Nick Nurse story, like anyway. But yeah, players that can come up for sure. And yeah, I think Halliburton, I really like that Halliburton shines a light on Caitlin's work because Caitlin, I say it every time I work with her, she's the best analyst in the world to me. And Halliburton shines a light on it because he thinks she's really good at what she does. And he clearly has an appreciation for what she uncovers as an analyst. And analysts, it's good not to be like, oh, I'm the coolest guy who notices things. But sometimes you notice things that players don't really pay attention to. And sometimes analysts get hired. I'm not saying Caitlin, but like sometimes analysts get hired to do things because if you're a really strong analyst and the way you communicate basketball, there's a chance that it has an application in a front office or a coaching capacity. Because again, everyone is just a schlub on the internet until you're not. And Caitlin is tremendous. She could work in an NBA like capacity in an instant. And I think that's why Halliburton is eagerly ready to acknowledge her. There's also like some media markets have players who will, like the Nick Gallo thing with the Thunder, right? And some media, like Pistons Jack came from Australia, and Cade Cunningham recognized him and brought him like a signed jersey and stuff like that. That stuff does not happen in Toronto. I'll just say, like, the players do like that kind of like interaction that happens in other markets. It's not, that is not really how it works in Toronto. Obviously, guys like Grange know players and, you know, that kind of stuff. Like Grange knows RJ. You can see like he's known that his dad, Rowan, right? He's known so many of these guys. But like as far as like new media being like cool with players, you'll see it in other markets. The guys in Toronto are not that way. It's just completely dependent on like what a player wants to give. Because if Caitlin could be just as good and Halliburton could just not care about that stuff. But Halliburton cares, and it's a huge boon. It's like, yeah, the best player on the team is shouting out your work. Great stamp. I've been talking for an hour and 6 minutes. Holy moly, dude. Okay, last question. And I will talk about some of these other questions next week because every time I get asked like 40 questions and then I do 45 minutes on Scottie's defense, one thing. Idiot, moron. Raps VE says, assume Scottie and BI are mainstays on the team for the future. What kind of archetypes do you think create an optimal environment for winning around them at the other three spots? And do we already possess any of them? I think we possess like 1.5. Maybe one. Maybe Jakob. I guess like winning around them, then I guess they have 2. If you want to talk about like maybe it's contending, then potentially they have like half. Like quickly is half, Jakob is half, because Jakob could get played off a floor in a playoff series. There's a potential for that in a really good series. But for the most part, Jakob is like a really, really strong center. He should count as 1 for winning basketball. Emmanuel quickly, if he brings it defensively, he could definitely count as 1. His offense is just so easy, especially if they are going a wing-led offense where he can kind of like not be responsible to manage pace and be like the point guard for everything. That kind of stuff matters. But the archetype, I've talked about this before, that they clearly need more than anything is like that Keon Ellis, Derek White, that archetype. And Grady, it'll also be what I talked about. Sophia asked the question last week about like the medium efficiency, high usage guys who help carry the offense and take tougher shots and make other guys' roles easier. Grady has potential to be that, I think. But Grady is so far behind on defense right now. It's really hard to project him as like plugging a hole. Like I'm still optimistic about Grady Dick for sure. However, there's optimism and liking him as a player, and there's the reality that like he's had such a tough time defensively, and it's hard to square that. But that really strong defender who can hit, you know, open threes, some contested threes, and is a good cutter and finishes at the rim, that is a really strong archetype to have at the 2. And like, I mean, Boston has 2 of them, right? They have Drew Holiday and they have Derek White. God, that team. Insane. Yeah. Emmanuel quickly, you can definitely win with that guy on the floor. Super easy. HK says, isn't Jacoby the Derek White type? I mean, you would be projecting so far ahead of his game. And I remember talking to like Joe Wolfon in 2020, and we were talking about how awesome Derek White is. And Derek White got like some of those possessions where he really got, and he had, injury troubles that obviously weren't that great. But Derek White by year 2, I think was just wholly, like if Jacoby White has the second year that Derek White had, I'll be extremely impressed. Derek White was also 24 in year 2, but Derek White is a really high bar. He's a really, really high bar to clear. Jacoby, I wouldn't rule it out. It's just that's a really high bar to clear. Derek White is giving you like around all-star level impact. It'd be crazy for him to make an all-star game, of course, but he's giving you like around all-star level impact. So, I mean, like that's just what it is, dude, It's that's the name of the game. YA says it's not a coincidence that the team's defense has gone way up since Grady's unfortunate injury. The thing is, Grady played all of January and all of February, and the Raptors defense was still really good, and they had a much harder schedule. And I'll go to and again, this is not me advocating for Grady Dick's defense. I don't think Grady Dick's defense is good. However, Grady Dick, I wonder how much worse they are defensively with him on the floor. So they're 5 points worse defensively with him on the floor. And some of that is they've been the best defense in the NBA since he got injured. Yeah, man. With him on the floor, teams, they shoot better. They turn over the ball less. They get more offensive rebounds. The Raptors foul more. And of course, not all of that is directly on Grady, but man, they've definitely, like, not having Grady out there, they're stronger at that position, guaranteed, defensively, because he's definitely the worst defender on the roster at his position, or for that glut of positions. Yeah, he's got to come back, man, with some oomph, a little bit of more weight to throw around. Yeah, Alex C says they need rim pressure and a guy that can set the table and get them easy possessions. That's the truth. That really is the truth. And ND says need a rim pressure guard, in my opinion. Scottie, in theory, should be that, but unfortunately hasn't been that. Yeah, there's also, like, if you go to Synergy, you can see that the Raptors, they have pretty good points per chance or points per possession when Emmanuel quickly gets a paint touch. Unfortunately, he just does not get a lot of paint touches. And that's a bit of a shame. Like, quickly is doing a better job of making good decisions when he's going downhill. He's just not doing it often enough. Ian says, but isn't our offense better with Grady on the floor? Yes, the offense is better with Grady on the floor. It's actually quite a bit better. They shoot better with him on the floor. They turn over the ball less with him on the floor. And what he allows people to do is he puts them in stronger positions, because Grady takes a lot of difficult shots that are currently on the floor, and that's what it is. Rezrov says RJ pressures the rim like a madman. Yes. The thing with RJ is that he's not finished well enough at the rim this year, which has been like, damn. He's having, relative to last year, he's definitely having a down year as a finisher. And I really wanted last year's finishing to like stabilize, because that would be a huge swing for him. But he's not finished that well this year, which is disappointing. He does pressure the rim like a madman. But his playmaking has fallen off a little bit as far as it pertains to like creating while going downhill out of drives compared to the start of the year. His numbers were really strong creating out of drives, like with passing at the start of the season. And they're not as strong anymore. They're still the strongest on the team, but it's been fading a little bit. And you could make the case that RJ has been less featured. Of course, there's contextual stuff for all of this, but RJ hasn't maintained some of the like creation boom, even on like a per possession basis. Like, obviously he's had less of the ball, but per possession, it's not been exactly where it was. And he has to finish at a higher rate. YA also says his free throw percentage is a killer. Yeah, it is. If he was 77% from the line, it's a big change. It's a really big change. That kind of stuff would be really meaningful. So there's, yeah, okay. Rezrov wants his finishing stats. Yeah, we'll just go to Synergy. I can pull those up just because we're having the RJ question. Because I think it is fair, as you bring up, like Rezrov is like, we're talking about rim pressure on the Raptors and saying they need it. It's like, well, RJ does bring that. Why aren't we talking about him directly right now, right? So, yeah, like pick and roll ball handler, when you include passes, he was in the 85th percentile for like the first half of the year. He's now 68th percentile, just as a mention. So that has been falling off. 68th is still good. Like if you didn't get to look at it at the year and at the start of the year, and you looked at the end of the year and he was 68th, you'd be like, that's nice. I will take that, of course. And we'll go to the shot types here just to get all this ready. So at the rim, he's an average finisher. He's the 48th percentile on layups. He shoots 54.5%. He's 240 440 layup attempts. 440 is a lot of layup attempts. Like, good on you, dude. And he's about average as a dunk finisher, although he just doesn't dunk very often. He dunks less often than you'd think. And it's usually because he has to work so hard to get to the rim. And kudos to him for doing it. He is, however, in the 80th percentile how often he shoots at the rim. That's that rim pressure. It's just the fact that he is 54.5% on layups, which is not where you want him to be, especially for a guy who spends that much time there. And if you're not going to be really great on layups, then you at least have to make a killing at the line when you get fouled a bunch. And he just doesn't. That is the downside to the RJ stuff, but he still deserves so much credit. The also tough thing is that he's shooting 41% on his drives per synergy. That synergy and second spectrum calculated a little bit differently. That might look different on certain websites, but that's kind of where we're sitting. So RJ has some things like ND says Twitter Live is so weird. It says there's 380 viewers, but no one talks in there. I suspect when I was looking at this, I don't know how it correlates, but I think maybe Twitter Live is cumulative. So I doubt there's 300. If there are 380 people watching live on Twitter, I'd be pretty surprised. But I mean, who knows, right? Rezrov says RJ and Yak have that push shot free throw form. Definitely Yak more than RJ. RJ, he really bows everything in, and he's clearly trying to make it more of his wrist, but he can't get his forearm out of there. Mel says, what do you consider RJ's trade value to be at this time? I have no idea. And I actually you only know people's trade markets once they're actually being shopped, and you actually get you can't. I thought I knew Luka Doncic's. I really did. And I had no idea. And also when Derek White, for example, when he got traded for way less than I thought. I was like, why didn't the Raptors trade for Derek? Because if he was available for that, I thought he was great. And, Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk, I thought to get Brandon Ingram was less than people thought too, right? It's really hard to project. It's really hard to thank you. Yeah, Caleb, I do need to drink some water, man. I've been talking for an hour 17. Give me a moment. Hot damn. Another hour and 17 on the way. Rezrov says Jared Allen as well. Yeah, guys just go. And it's really hard to project that kind of stuff. And I won't pretend to know an early second, a late first, how the hell? HK says off topic, but why do you think Pascal shoots his free throws from a foot behind the line? I noticed his mechanics changed after his surgery. I talked to Rick Carlisle about this. I didn't get to talk to Pascal about this, but Pascal, he gets rid of his guide hand early. Pascal used to take his guide hand up nearly to the peak, but now as his hand gets in front of his face, his guide hand falls away. And if you take a still shot of his hand, it'll just be a one-handed shot for Pascal. And he also cocks his wrist a lot more on his 3-point jumper now. He tweaked a lot of things in the offseason in regards to his jumper. And the foot behind the line, I mean, it might just be for some guys, the angle they shoot it at or the flick of their wrist, it's easier to manage that distance than others. And what is he shooting from free throw this year? It's definitely much better than it was last year, right? Pascal free throw percentage. Yeah, last year it was, I guess, it's not even that much better. 73 versus 74%. But it has been dipping, right? Second year or third year in the league, 78. Fourth year, 79. Fifth year, 83. Sixth year, 75. Seventh year, 77. Eighth year, 73. This year, 74. But I think he's been missing a lot of free throws lately. It used to be up towards 77. He's also been missing more threes lately because he was at 44% for a while. Now he's at 39. Bit of a dip. He's been yeah, obviously not, and his shooting has been kind of trending down. But yeah, we'll see. That Pacers team, they're a bunch of grinders. I'm excited to see them in the playoffs, see what it looks like. Yeah. Okay. That's like a podcast. It's gotta be. David Leverett says Queen over Malwatch. Probably not for me, I don't think. But I think I'd have them in the same tier. I haven't seen enough because there's definitely questions on here that are like more draft based, and I will eventually get to that kind of stuff. But I haven't. I trust when I watch a guy that I can say what a guy can and can't do. I think my eye test is good enough for that. I also familiarize myself with the stats, the proprietary ones, and introduce them to you guys that you probably wouldn't get elsewhere. I try and tell you what I'm seeing and analyzing. But as far as like the spread or the breadth of the class, I'm just not even close yet. But I've got a few months of catching up to do. The NBA season's still going on. All right. That feels like a podcast. Make sure to like the video on your way out. It actually does help. It does. You're listening to this now. Hit that little like button. It helps out the channel. It spreads it to other people who hopefully will enjoy 45 minutes of Scottie Barnes defense and then whatever the hell we've been talking about for the back end, Reddit, relationships to players, all that good stuff. Thank you. I'm going to go swim. I'm lane swimming tonight. I'm trying to be like a rock star, dude. I want to be able to do everything in this world. I'm rock climbing a lot. I'm swimming. I'm trying to be like, I did a marathon. I'm trying to be like an Iron Man, dude. That's what I'm going to get up to. Okay. Thank you to everybody for listening in. I appreciate you all so very much. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.